And we're really happy to have Rena Hicks here, who is the executive director of Freedom Virginia. I've been reading their press releases, looking at how they've been disseminating messaging, renting billboards in areas, and I'm going, wow, that's really great. So anyway, and I think that's the next step in our group in terms of advocacy, is really looking at these messages. So let's just take a little bit of look at big money in politics. How did we get here? The Virginia Challenge, and then transition to Freedom Virginia and talk a little bit of their legislative priorities. I've been monitoring some of their bills, which have been just vetoed, which is really sad. And then get into this brainstorming session. And just to remind us all, we're Big Money Out. We're linked to American Promise, which is unique in the democracy reform space because they look at a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, recognizing that since Citizens United in 40 years of Supreme Court rulings, there's a lot of dark money in our politics, and the only way you can get it out is through a constitutional amendment. So federally, we're doing that. And then when Eugenia, you weren't here, but like 5 years ago, my colleague from Peace Corps said, why don't we look at Virginia? And it's funny, we all looked sort of confused and looked around the room because none of us knew anything about Virginia politics. And lo and behold, we are like 40, we are a statistical outlier in terms of campaign finance. So we figured that's a way to build enthusiasm, to show the perception of corruption, reveal the perception of corruption on a local level to get people upset. And the whole federal thing is, we all know this. It's gonna be crazy this year. They're already doing projections of, looking at 2020, that was the presidential race and the congressional race. And now for 2024, it was $16 billion, and now they're looking at actually even getting up to $20 billion and increasing. The issue is with Citizens United, it's not so much the contributions to candidates, but it's all this independent expenditure flooding in from the corporation, special interest, even foreign money, because dark money, you're giving money for 501c4s, you don't know whether they're getting money from Putin. So we're already, the Open Secrets, which is the national organization looks at this data, is already projecting that it's going to be at record levels, of course. And of course, this is an issue that Americans actually, you don't have a lot of consensus on issues, but 80 to 90% of Americans say that there's too much big money in our politics. And so when you transition to Virginia, and this has nothing to do with independent expenditures, that the money washing around the system that isn't directly linked to the candidate, but Virginia has no dollar limits on any type of campaign contributions. And we're one of 5 states, and I'm sort of depressed. We've been having discussions with Oregon. Oregon was one of the 5 states, but they're a ballot initiative state. I wish we were a ballot initiative state, because this is the 3rd time they've issued this ballot initiative. They want limits. And so their legislature sort of panicked, recognizing the writing was on the wall. So they actually, I think the governor just signed a limits bill last week. So we will be one of 4. No limits on contributions from corporations, including public utilities. And one of the most egregious things that, just irks me is, no restrictions on politicians' personal use of campaign donations. So if Rena decides to run for office, and you're from Norfolk, I think, whether I pronounce that correctly or not, I can just give you $1 million and you can just go and take all your lobbyists to the Caribbean and have a nice vacation. And then there's limited regulatory oversight by the Department of Elections. One of the first things we did, which was great, we asked the Wassenaar Center to do a polling. And it was like, so we did this polling. We have no money, we're just a bunch of volunteers. It's like, okay, it's going to be like $4,000 for these questions. And then we actually set up a fund me thing, and it was great. We said, we don't want any more people to give more than $25. So we actually collect enough money for the poll, and we call it the People's Poll. And then we were worrying, oh my God, what happens if the data is different from what we expect from the national average? And it was great, 78% of Virginians, 4 out of 5 Virginians, irrespective of party, think that there's too much money about big money donors. And 88% want public disclosure of all contributions. So it was very gratifying to have a statistically sound sample backing us up. And however, we could never get any tractions. Bills were introduced and killed. And when you look at the last year's election, I think it was just sort of the catalyst. It not only was it the most expensive election in Virginia history, $188 million coming in, for the Senate and the delegates race, but it was the second highest in the country. It was only Illinois that has the higher cost of elections. And when you take it on a per capita basis, because obviously you can't compare New York or Texas or California because there's such, 39 million people, we have 8.7. But you look now, it's $22 per capita. So per capita, we have the most expensive elections in Virginia. And when you break it down, when you look at this, who contributions are coming from in what amount of money, you can see here we did it. We took the Open Secrets data, and large donations above $10,000 account for 85% of all Virginia contributions. I bet if for those of us who were watching money going into candidate coffers last year, it was like, well, okay, the Youngkin PAC, I mean, he got $22 million. He was getting out-of-state millions of dollars from out-of-state billionaires. And 83% of donors contribute $500 or less per candidate. I mean, I don't give more than $500 per candidate, and it's only 4% of total contribution. So it's totally out of whack, and Virginians have lost their voice. It comes as no surprise that we're ranked 46 out of 50 on the Swamp Index, the Coalition for Integrity. Only Utah, Michigan, Arizona, Indiana, and Wyoming are below us. You think, these are the sort of statistics that you use to say legislators, and it's like, well, does that mean anything to them, or do they need something, a story that brings that has more power than just pure facts? This year we came in, we were like, oh, it's so excited. We had great bills. We worked with legislators on writing the bills, and we had, just limits disclosure of dark money advertising, personal use of public financing of elections, personal use of all these campaigns. And I swear, we were so excited. We had great champions. The Democrats were in power, and they all died. And it was basically, they were killed by Democrats. And so now we're sort of licking our wounds going, okay, and going back to the drawing board. I do think this year we're looking at, we have great champions. We're in discussion with the legislators, seeing what happened, what do we need to do to talk to the Speaker's office. We're going to do restriction of personal use, still working with that. Dark money advertising, we're trying to deal with the ACLU came out. For some reason, the ACL thinks it's okay. Freedom of speech includes privacy of speech, so they don't think that donors should have to reveal their identity, which I find as a donor to the ACLU that they're prioritizing their own large donors that from over the civil rights of Virginians who shouldn't be knowing who's tried to influence our elections. Restrictions on fundraising this after general election. This was a new idea that David Bolton came up with, which I think is interesting. Investing in a campaign portal in the Department of Elections. I think that's great. That was a bill introduced by a Republican a couple of years ago. Probably has a chance of getting through. Public financing of election. Marcus Simon has a great bill based on the public financing, small progressive disclosure in New York. If we can just figure out the financing of that, I think that that's something that we can attract interest on both sides, and of course ethics reform. So we have all these bills, that we're starting working now, getting buy-in from legislators, reaching out to Republicans because we're a nonpartisan group. Current activities, of course, we were trying to meet with all legislators, Republican, to say, just tell us what you think can get passed. What do you support? What don't you support? We have action alert. I'll put that in the chat. We're asking everybody to send a letter to the legislators. And, this goes to Rena, who's from the Tidewater, is we're really trying to influence, the speaker and some of I think we've got it wrapped up for Northern Virginia. We're here, we're in their faces, but it's the Tidewater and then looking at Republicans, of course, in the center and the Southwest. So we're prioritizing and targeting these legislators, and it would be good to get Rena's feedback on how they did that as a group. And we're getting, since it's Congress, we're getting our congressional candidates to sign our money out pledge. I asked Don Beyer, he signed it he's always an easy guy to get it. So there's 94 people running for Congress. Of course, there's crazy in District 10. I think there are 13 Democrats, trying to build up this awareness, saying, okay, if you go in there, will you support campaign finance on a federal level, including a constitutional amendment? So just transitioning into Rena's discussion, we came into this because we think good governance is important. It's supported by most Americans. Everybody believes that money in politics, but then you really have to look at, why do you care about money in politics? And I guess when you look at some of our priorities, obviously Virginia energy policies and the role of Dominion, climate change issues, spiraling drug prices. Rena knows all about this. Dysfunctional healthcare system, mass incarceration. There's still GEO is a private prison that still give money to the legislators. Nursing home care and regulations came out during COVID, just looking at the hedge funds and how they're buying up nursing homes and how these regulations, how to safeguard our seniors, broadband access, school boards, of course, as the 2021, all of a sudden in Loudoun County is the epicenter. And here I have the Moms for Liberty, who we're a grassroots organization, and they came in 2021, said, we're a grassroots organization. We get our money from selling T-shirts. Of course, they're getting $1 million from the right to basically basically undermine our system of public education. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to turn it over to Rena. And Rena, you're just the executive director of Freedom Virginia. It's a great group. I've been watching with interest, what bills you're doing, how you're trying to promote them, your press releases. Could you tell us a little bit about it, how you got into it? And I also noticed that now you're the head of the Democratic Business Alliance of Southampton too. So tell us a little bit about that, because we really like to look at how, we can build on your expertise, especially in messaging and in partnership, because this year we did a democracy day with the League of Women Voters, Represent Us, Upvote Virginia, which has a ranked choice voting bill, which was just vetoed yesterday by the governor. It's like, so just tell us about what you're doing and, the storytelling and and then we can have a discussion on brainstorming on this. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Rena Hicks. I'll start first, just a little side. That's kind of my side gig. I'm the executive director also of the Democratic Business Alliance of Southampton Roads, but they just host breakfast like every other month. And so I'm more on like an admin side of just setting all that up. So, but it's fun. It's a good group of folks that they just really run programs. So we have speakers come in during breakfasts and do some fun networking events. But my daytime, full-time, normally where my head's at is Freedom Virginia. I put some information in the chat from our website with a link if you guys are interested in visiting or signing up for our emails and newsletters. But we were organized in 2020. I did not come on as executive director until April of 22. So I'm just about, at the end of this month, it'll be 2 years. How exciting. Time flies. And we mainly focus on economic security policies. So anything from affordable health care, childcare, utility rate reform, tax fairness, anything to secure financial prosperity for Virginians and also lower the cost of living, and really just get at those kind of kitchen table issues. So this session, our priorities, I actually have them to put them in the chat too. Our big one, which was just vetoed yesterday, like 2 hours before the deadline, which was expected, but it still sucks, was a prescription drug affordability board. So this would be an independent body of healthcare experts that have no ties to the pharmaceutical field. And they would evaluate drug pricing, only up to 10 a year. And they would have the ability, if appropriate, if deemed by the board, to set upper payment limits for what Virginians pay. So that would mean that you go to the pharmacy to pick up your medicine. And if it's one of the top 10 most expensive in Virginia, I'm on one because I'm a type 1 diabetic. So like called Trulicity, for example, you'd go pick it up and let's say they set the number at 50, you will not pay above 50 regardless of insurance, of copay, anything. You will not be paying above 50. And that's the same throughout the chain. So there's a little bit of misinformation, especially with the governor's veto statement that I'm kind of confused about. But so that got all the way through the House and the Senate. This is the third year we introduced that bill. Last year and this year, we had Senator Bill Stanley on it. We found a lot of common ground with Republicans, especially from rural areas. And I don't know. I don't know if this is because they're 4-year terms, if they feel more independent, but I found it's been a lot easier working with Republicans in the Senate. They tend to, I think, have more of like independent thought of their districts than the folks in the House seem to be very rank and file. So in the House, we only had one Republican that voted for the PDAB bill, and that was Delegate Ellen Campbell, also from a really rural area with her own story of healthcare costs recently with the passing of her husband. So and we'll get to it, but it really comes back to these stories and people being affected by things, which is unfortunate in a lot of ways because not everyone's going to be directly affected by these issues, but we should all still care about them. We also were going for paid family medical leave, and this was by Delegate Brianna Sewell and Senator Boysko. This also made it out. There were some changes to it. It ended up being 8 weeks, and it had carved out state employees. So we weren't super thrilled with what came out, but we were, it was still a step in the right direction, and it was still matching what the Commonwealth provides to their employees. And that just got vetoed, of course, by Governor Youngkin. It was, I think it came on the drop of his anti-business vetoes. So he said this was bad for business, even though I think it makes Virginia incredibly competitive if we were to have a paid family medical leave program. We were also advocating for a paid sick leave program, which is different. Paid family medical is if you think longer term. If you have a medical emergency yourself or you need to take care of someone from your family, you would be able to take that time. Paid sick days, we were advocating for 5 minimum in Virginia, and that didn't make it out of either chamber, unfortunately. A lot of it this year, this session was around the budget. That's what we heard a lot. There was a lot of having to prioritize what we're going to put in there because there wasn't a lot of revenue raisers, which is a whole other conversation because we also focus on tax fairness. And so there were some tax policies like the millionaire's tax that I think it was called the Fair Share Act this session that we were really hoping would gain some traction, which would tax 10% of income over $1 million. So I think people were like, whoa, assets, no. If you are making an income of over $1 million, we would tax it there. Only on the additional from the million. So I don't know a lot of millionaires in the state, but apparently they were loud. But also went for the earned income tax credit. child tax credit. These are just for us kind of basic tax policies that help working Virginians. Let's see. Junk fees was a fun bill we had this year. No one likes junk fees. And I'm of the belief that they hurt small businesses and independent businesses, especially that, to be honest, just maybe don't have the funds to do crazy marketing and advertising and clickbait buttons of, sale $20 here, and then you click it, and then there's a delivery fee on top of a processing fee, and then an admin fee. And you're like, what are all these different things? And of course, you don't find that out until the very end. So that was a fun bill we worked on. This is also something that is trying to be tackled at the federal level, which I will say too, especially as we get into our brainstorm, I always find that really helpful to put into context things when you can kind of connect it with something federal. Just like you were talking about, Nancy, with the End Citizens United, and then taking a look at Virginia stuff. It was nice to kind of point to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and what they're doing with junk fees and consumer protection. And I found it kind of makes our legislators feel a little more confident sometimes when it's a new idea, that it's like, hey, this is also being done at the federal level, but we know how that works. It moves very slow, or maybe they won't cover everything. They're only going to cover, federal entities. So let's cover the state. So that's that. And then I'm going to put in a link to our biggest priority was our Prescription Drug Affordability Board. And this link should be open to everyone. This is our storybook. And we did this last year. We updated it again this year. And this is stories that we collected across the Commonwealth, across, geographies, politics, everything, of folks in their words sharing their stories about high prescription drug costs. We saw this back in the Medicaid expansion fight, and it was very, very useful in connecting these specific stories, because I can get down to, the locality level and connect them with their delegate or senator. And it's hard. It's easier for legislators to brush you off, or kind of just like, yeah, sure, okay. But when you have a constituent from their district saying, hey, this is a problem I have, and I'm a voter in your district, it makes it really difficult for them to completely brush you off. So that was really useful. We emailed that around. We printed off these really nice, high quality booklets of it. And so when we did our lobby day this year for the Virginians for Affordable Medicine, we handed those out to every office, so they had something physical. And it was so nice. And I was a former legislative aide, that I know that they're not going to throw those away because they feel bad. So I was like, they will keep this forever in their office. It will move with them. And so for the story collections, we do them a couple ways. We do them very organically from our social media. We have 4 organizers at Freedom Virginia. I'll send the link right here if anyone wants to share their story of a high prescription drug cost or childcare affordability. If you have a paid sick leave or paid family medical leave story, feel free to share. And then we will reach out to you, and we kind of go through the stories of, are you okay if we use them in front of press? Can we use them with legislators? Can we use them on social media? So it's been one of our main core priorities and work at Freedom Virginia is our organizing team. Like I said, we have 4 organizers. They're based around the Commonwealth. They hold community events. They partner with other groups. We'll hold town halls. We partner with legislators on things. I think we're about to have a town hall in a couple weeks with Delegate Mike Fagans. We're going to sponsor that. Nancy, are you in Loudoun?
No, I'm in Alexandria, and most of us are in Northern Virginia.
Okay, yeah. I have an organizer, Vanessa Borg, up in Loudoun, and she does a lot up there.
She did, and she invited us, all of the grassroots groups, to participate in that event. It was really well done. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I will definitely pass that on. Yeah, she's wonderful. So that's kind of our MO, is really, and we tend to, not just during the legislative cycles, but also electoral. We've also kind of found that with some other partner groups, it seems to be people are in either or bucket. They're either very big and active legislatively or electorally, but not necessarily both. And so that's where we've also kind of found success, I think, is that we're still here. We don't disappear after a campaign cycle. We're here, we're in session. We're going to follow up on things you said on the campaign trail. You said you're going to support this. Here we are. We're in the building, and we're hanging out and here, meeting with folks. So that's been really important for us. Great organizing team. Yeah, I mean, if you
Where are
want to take questions.
Sorry, where are the other organizers? You said you have 4 of them?
Yeah, so I have one in Loudon, one in Richmond, and then one that kind of splits her time, Richmond and actually up in Arlington. She's in grad school, so she's down half the time. And then one in Virginia Beach, who most recently was in Roanoke, but he moved to Virginia Beach now.
Does anybody else have, I mean, I guess I have a question about the structure of your organization and how you manage, because we've been talking about the need, working with Common Cause and maybe developing grassroots organizers. So how is the structure of your organization? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's myself as the executive director, and then I have a deputy executive director, Bridget Godfrey. And then we have a digital manager that helps with our email and social media. And then actually, our Virginia Beach organizer is our organizing director, Eddie C. And he kind of helps work one-on-one with the organizers, help find them events. And we also use the organizers a lot. And I do want to mention this because I think it's really important, that organizers are not just like one-dimensional. Not only are they in their community, but they're also, for me, they're like the liaison between the folks and like our comms team and our legislative team, because when we just did a statewide press tour, urging the governor to sign our prescription drug affordability board bill. And we had mobile billboards up. We went to Roanoke, Charlottesville, and Richmond. And in each of those locations, we were like, okay, let's get a storyteller. Let's get someone that's actually impacted by this legislation. Let's reach out to community leaders and get them involved. And so that's also where our organizing team comes in, because our comms team would be struggling without them. And so really lean on them and as they're making those contacts, thinking, okay, is this someone that would be good maybe if we wanted to like place an op-ed, or maybe, if the news wants to interview someone. And that's what we've really learned too with comms, is that if there's not a real person, it's really hard to find a news hook for folks to write something about. And so you could have like this very, not even controversial, but just popular bill that people want to talk about, but the news doesn't want to cover it unless there's like a real person. Like they get kind of tired of just the legislators over and over and over. And so we were really aggressive and strong and successful in finding real people for reporters to talk to. Even in our ads, we typically use real people that volunteer and would actually benefit from the legislation. So yeah, that's another little tidbit.
So they're
Eddie is the best. Thank you, Heidi.
So they're full-time staff, the organizers.
They're full-time. Yes. Everyone in Freedom, Virginia is full-time. Actually, no, I do have one part-time organizer. She's in grad school.
Action is the same.
And then how do they do the stories? How do you get these stories?
It's difficult. And it's a lot different from like political electoral organizing, where those organizers are like calling, you're like, hey, do you support this candidate? Yes or no? Let me tell you a little bit about them. You are asking people, and especially for the issues we work on, about very intimate, sensitive things, and a lot of things that people don't want to talk about, like their financial situation, their lack of ability to afford their medicine. There's there's a lot of even the communities we reach out to. If we're reaching out to communities of color that have historically been, brushed aside for decades and have trust issues. So a lot of it's time and really investing in your local communities and making sure that, again, kind of going back to making sure that we're here after the election cycle and they still see us, and that they're not just like, oh, okay, all these people come in, a couple months before the election and then they're gone. We are there year round. We participated in the Leesburg Christmas Parade, which was so much fun. And we handed out little postcards just with our information on them with like a candy cane. And it's like, I think we ordered 1,500 like little package things. And we were like empty with them within like the first half of the parade. And so it's like things like that people don't necessarily consider. So we've been really trying to rethink like what organizing is and what community organizing is.
Does anybody else? I mean, Heidi is down in the Tidewater.
Yeah.
And Heidi also works a lot on social media and comms. I'd sort of like to get Heidi's perspective on how, because you know Eddie, so how do you view that, the way they work down there?
You mean like as far as Freedom Virginia?
Yeah, Freedom Virginia, and then
Eddie
also
is like everywhere. He's a really sweet guy.
and so
Try to link up. We've been trying to do like a CD2 coalition thing to get Missy elected here. And he tries to come to that as often as possible. It's just a Zoom that's like once a month or whatever, but
yeah. But he's based in Virginia Beach, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And then how did you decide where you were going to post your grassroots organizers? I guess Richmond you need somebody who can sort of act as a lobbyist, right? I don't know. Is that
A
part?
little bit. So the person there is Grace Robinson. And I think I have been classified right now as like our advocacy organizer. They mainly take the lead on all the coalitions we're involved in, work with partner groups. And then when we're in Richmond, they do a bunch of organizing and events around the legislation in session. I'm the lobbyist for Freedom Virginia as well. Actually, yeah, no, I'm the lobbyist for Freedom Virginia. We have a couple other contract lobbyists, but the organizers, they're only really role like they're not testifying usually during session. They're mainly there to help again with like getting those they help bring in testimony. Like, hey, we met at an event last October. You told me you had a story. This bill is up. Would you like to come testify and share your experience in front of the legislators? So that's kind of the role they have. But as far as picking, I feel like half of it was kind of natural, like we were hiring for someone, especially a couple of them are specific for like prescription drug affordability organizing. And so some of that was kind of like statewide, so it didn't really matter. But it worked out with Eddie wanting to move to Virginia Beach because we were going to want to put someone there, especially just for Hampton Roads after redistricting. And he wanted to retire in Virginia Beach eventually. So he was like, oh, I'll move because I want to be there. And so eventually I'd like to hire someone back in Roanoke and have someone out in Southwest Virginia. But it kind of organically worked out oddly. But yeah, I would like to have everyone like spread out and just be able to like cover more territory. And if there's an event over here, that person can get it. Or if we have an ask from a reporter in Charlottesville, who's the closest one or who has the most connections in that area.
And then, because it really depends on who you're trying to influence, right? And it's like when you look
thinking
at
about who your audience is.
Yeah, I mean, your audience can be citizens, and then there are also legislators. So do you try to you're nonpartisan, so you try to influence Republicans too, right? Do you change do you find yourself changing the message when and do you work through constituents? We have a hard time. Well, since most of the Republicans are not in Northern Virginia, it's
Yeah. Yeah, working through constituents. Honestly, I find I really don't change. I'm trying to think back. My approach too much. If I change it, I think it's more geographical. I find to be more of like a better way to adjust. But I don't know. I've always been very like, this is who we are. And, I think sometimes people think we're coded one way or the other, but I believe in the work we've done, and I have nothing to hide. So, and I don't want to ever come across like I'm trying to trick someone. So I'm pretty usually open about it. And I found that also kind of disarms people. If they think that you're being like a little fake or trying to angle them in a certain way, like they can pick up on that. So yeah, I would say honestly, I would even, the delegate Ellen Campbell voting for our prescription drug affordability bill, I drove out to her district last summer and had lunch with her.
she's in Stanton, right? Is that right?
She's in Stanton, yeah. Or sorry, not Stan. Oh gosh, Lexington.
Lexington, okay.
I had my son with me. It was summer. He was at a camp that week, so I especially do like the in-district meetings, because I think when you're in Richmond, it's really easy for there's a million people they're seeing all day long, and you kind of blend in, your issue blends in. I really believe in taking people, like going in their district or just somewhere different that like makes you a little more memorable. But we had lunch one day and had a great conversation, and I kind of led with my story of having type 1 diabetes and why this was important to me. And it's also, of course, when you have, some backups of research and polling, and I'm like, hey, we polled in your district. This is what your constituents think. This is not a Democrat or Republican thing. 80% and above is the support for all political parties. So kind of using that too in a way to kind of help make sure that it's not just coming off like it's a partisan conversation.
Yeah. And I noticed just the link between the issues that you're looking at, the stories that you're doing. There is a link with money and politics in quite a few of them, I think, at least the drug because I was impressed by your press release that actually showed, that, and I went into VPAP, and Youngkin had gotten $300,000 from the pharmaceutical companies. I'm not sure, then you look at family leave. And then I suppose the question is, making the link between money and politics, like whether it's a chamber of commerce or I don't know,
that one's hard because it's just all business, so you could say any businesses that donated to him that don't have an existing paid family medical leave program perhaps would be against that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way of leveraging that, your stories and the demise of those bills into something that we can, that we as a group can market? I'm not quite.
I think so. We're very, our philosophy is very like values forward. And that's something that we've found, when looking at like the two different parties and their platforms and their messaging, people tend to agree with a lot of the Democratic platform, but the way they message can be tricky because they're very numbers and explanation and long-winded and long form, when really everyday Virginians just want to get to like a values conversation. Do you value hard work? Do you value getting paid for your hard work? Do you value being able to afford your medicine for your family member and that needs this to survive? So it's more about kind of removing the partisan overtones and even some of the bill language and just getting this is what it would do, just like you were saying. What were we talking about earlier? You had mentioned a number. The swamp index. To me, that's a perfect example of if you went up to any random Virginian and you were like, hey, what were we, 80, 81 or 70, whatever number we were on.
46 out of 50.
Yeah. They'd be like, okay. And like, what is that, or what does that mean? And so another example I like to use is when we talk about like public school funding. No one knows. I can't even comprehend like what $1 billion is realistically. And when you're talking about like school funding and things, I don't know. I don't know what a new school costs. I don't know what it takes annually to employ a security guard or a resource teacher, or even just, replenishing gymnasium, basketballs and sports equipments. I have no idea. So if you tell me you're going to invest $292 million in my school system, I'm like, that sounds great. I think, is that great? Is that too high? Is that too low? Is that normal? Is that what we need? If you're going to tell me, hey, we're going to make sure that your son's school has a nurse, and it's fully staffed, and we're going to have gifted teachers and resource teachers, and we're not going to have to share the art teacher with 4 other schools only once a week, that I can understand. And so it's like leading with those values and leading with like the brownie and not the brownie recipe. That's what we always say too. It's like, sell the brownie, not the recipe. No one wants to know what all is in it. Just give me the brownie.
Yeah, that's a great saying. Yeah, challenge with us is the complexity of campaign finance reform and trying to influence legislators and make them care. I mean, one legislator who I really like, and she championed a bill, I said, personal use, 48 other states have it, the federal government has it. If this perception of corruption is as dangerous as corruptions themselves. And she said, but Nancy, if just because other states have it, why should we? It's like, I don't, it's obviously my messaging was wrong. Well, basically, but what is so special about Virginia legislators that you can't have basic guidelines on safeguards on something like that? I don't know. So it's all about messaging. And
Yeah. For me, for this issue specifically with campaign finance, because I think about it a lot and we're very supportive of campaign finance reform, would be, because you talk to Virginians, and just like the poll, if you ask them straight up, they'll be like, yeah, like, of course, like, I want money out of it. This is corrupt. And sometimes I do think that's the issue. I think an easier issue a lot is overcoming a falsity, like overcoming, no, actually, that's not how it works. But with this, people expect politicians overwhelmingly, like they think of them as corrupt automatically. They think of them as taking so much money, of being rich off of money, which even, we laugh sometimes with like the state legislators' salaries, like $17,000. So, and people are mind blown by that because they think that they're getting 6 figures off of this job. So there's already this perception that's really hard to change because it's like, well, it is what it is. Why should we care? Yeah, of course, they're always corrupt. And that's really difficult to change when people not only like know something's true, but then just like believe that it's so far gone that they can't do anything about it. And then making that connection is really hard. We've even struggled with just even like the pharmaceutical, donations connection, because another issue that we deal with our bill is big pharma will set up a ton of kind of advocacy groups, and some of them are legit, but they fund them and they give them operating money and then come back for their favor.
It's like Dominion.
So, in a way. And so it's really hard to even draw the line and like open people's eyes up to that, because it's there's almost too many steps to follow that you lose people. So it's something I think about a lot. And it's one of those, especially as an organization, where we have these other issues, is I feel like I'm constantly doing this dance between, okay, I care about this and I want to keep, chasing down these reforms, but at the same time, I'm worrying on these other issues. And then we're competing against, Dominion, the Chamber of Commerce, all these corporate, big pharma, all these corporate resources that sometimes you're like, okay, well, we also have to compete with them and act like them to get anything done, with at the same time trying to dismantle this broken system. So it's a tightrope walk.
Yeah, it's a real tightrope to walk, because we were talking about, the value forward, the sandwich sort of,
Mhm.
and you have to sort of have an enemy. And it's like, well, who's the enemy? And then it
You,
was
yep.
like, okay, well, Dominion, it's easy to hate Dominion, right? But you don't want to say your legislators are corrupt, that's bad. And then somebody from the league said, well, the system is broken. But then if you say the system is broken, everybody sort of gives up because it's just like too difficult to change
It
this.
feels overwhelming. You're like, well, what am
Yeah.
I going to do?
So, I was impressed, and I mentioned this to the head of the league when you went down in that Roanoke thing, and then I think you rented like a truck and you had a billboard. Was that effective? I thought I'd be happy to do that. It's like,
I think it was effective because it's not used often. And again, these are just these little, I'm very thankful. We have a wonderful comms consultant team. And I've just learned, sometimes in the beginning, I'd be like, okay, I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but no, it is. They're little tips and tricks. Having a visual brings TV cameras. So it was really important for us to do something fun. Plus, it's just like the billboard truck would drive around the city all day before or after our press conference. So it's like it almost continued as well. And it just was something new for folks to write about and read about. And they would see the truck and be like, oh, what's that? So just anything kind of out of the norm, because especially the last election cycle, a big goal of ours was like, okay, we have to break through the noise. And we're not only competing against campaigns or other organizations, we're competing against Coca-Cola, right? And Crest and whatever like the big commercials on TV are, and digital ads. Like you're competing against also just the real world and the consumer world. So thinking of things that are unique that will break through that noise, that people aren't just like, oh, okay, that's a political ad or something. But really kind of making them stop and watch and listen and just anything to grab eyes. I love billboards. I'm happy like the bigger ones are coming back too, because I think they're just so effective and easy. Especially now there's a bunch of electronic billboards and they're cheap and you can put your message up there and folks see it.
how do you
We
determine
sponsored.
if it's effective?
I think just like getting feedback from folks that they're like, oh, I saw your board, and there's some things that we put like QR codes on, and so we could tell if people are visiting the site. During in December, we were approached and did it, and I loved it because we did get a lot of clicks on our website and some story submissions. We sponsored a Broadway ad pamphlet for the Broadway show Aladdin, and it came to Chrysler Hall in Norfolk, and we sponsored like the playbook for it. And so we had the whole back page about sharing your story as we led up to the General Assembly session in January. And it's just like that's an easy, like it was a more expensive one, but it's guaranteed direct to voter of thousands of people that night.
And where did you have it distributed? Where did you put it?
It was at a Broadway show. It was on the back, like the playbook, when you go into like a Broadway show and they give the little, and people collect those and save them forever. They don't normally throw them away. So I was like, let's do an ad on the back page. That sounds great.
Good. Yeah. And what is the most of, do you find, what is the most, where do you get the most bang for your buck in terms of advertising, like social media? Or we write a lot of letters to the editor, but I don't know, it's sort of hit and miss. I don't know. It's and I know Heidi does a lot of social media. They do with her groups, but I'm not quite sure where the best way to attract attention to an issue is.
I think for us, and it depends, and they don't come often, but like our in-person events, we do a series in the summer in the warmer months called Parents in the Park, and that's across the state. And our organizers will pick a park with a shelter and bathrooms nearby and parking, and we invite local legislators on both sides of the aisle, and they come out and talk with parents. And then the idea is, the kids would play at the playground. We have like snacks and bubbles for them. And so those are always well attended. And then again, all those community events we try to do as many like Pride Fest events as possible. If we're able to do like a farmer's market, because it's people are there. I think the most bang for your buck is always going to be anything that you can attend that you are not responsible solely for drawing in people. That's always going to be the best bang for your buck. Go to the populated areas, people will come to you.
Yeah, last year
And just have
we went down to the Augusta County Fair and tabled for 5 days. And it was quite interesting
Oh,
and
yeah.
being out of our blue bubble. But we're going to try to do I think it's the Harrisonburg, it's the get to a bigger county fair. But you don't know how much impact, for our messaging. It's like for you, it's easier. So you have families matter, children matter. I'm never quite sure, I talked to one woman and she was obviously asking me if I thought the election was stolen. And I was like, sort of saying, well, I think that Youngkin won the election, sort of. And then I said, well, do you think it's right that billionaires are buying our election? It was really interesting how she really, then we had a conversation. But at the end of the day, you have all these conversations with citizens. Where do you want it to lead? What do you want them to do? When
Right.
you're targeting,
have that ready.
right. Other than
For
getting their
us, a lot of it is
yeah.
a lot of it's story. And a lot of it's also taking action. So we always do, email blasts that we have set up, email forms to legislators or signing a petition, things like that. It says my network is unstable. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think also for campaign finance reform, I was just thinking, I wonder if, and it's not like, I hate to call it like a bait and switch, but I think you can almost bait and switch people, have a couple of flyers out on the front page with like main issues. What does, someone coming to your table care about? Are they looking, are they struggling with childcare affordability? Are they struggling with prescription drugs? Are they struggling with even like gun violence and the environment and things far beyond just Freedom Virginia issues? And then on the flip side, having a couple bullet points of how money in politics affects that and influences it, and just kind of doing a visual, this is the connection here.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Does anybody else have any questions? I think we're going to go into this brainstorming with Common Cause, and so they brought up the idea of having us have some grassroots organizers, and so this is very helpful for you to hear from you about how to organize. A question though, since we're an LLC because we got a small grant from Clean Virginia to organize Democracy Day, but you're a 501c4. So if you look at, like organizing, having a structure, how much does it cost for a 501c4? Or
Like, how much do we pay our organizers?
yeah, how just in a ballpark.
Yeah, well, they're a little higher now because we do cost of living increases every year. They all start like around 55, but most are close to 60 now, and then our organizing directors in the 70s.
Okay, so but that does include healthcare. That's sort of a comprehensive package, or anyway, because we're going to be looking at this. Huh?
Yeah, Freedom Virginia covers the premiums for healthcare. So all they're responsible for is their copays when they go to the doctor.
Because then we were thinking, we're going to have this brainstorming, and I was trying to think, because we don't want to set up an organization, and I don't, want to be a paid executive, but it would be nice to sort of have some people out there that we could work with. And then we were trying to think of how to affiliate them. And I was thinking, because Brian Johns, you probably know, he's like executive director of Virginia Organizing, and they're perfectly situated in, 15 hubs around the state. If we could figure out how to work with them in terms of, Alex, say, we could provide you with this resource. We'll be looking at, I don't know, what, I don't want to say anti-corruption, good governance issues. Because we all care about good governance, you know, so maybe that's what we'll try to,
That would be, yeah, that would be ideal.
yeah. Okay, everybody, thanks, Rena. It was so nice. I've met some of your staff. I met Grace at the Women's Summit. I met Vanessa
Yeah.
in Loudon. They are just fantastic. So we
Thank
really,
you. I'm very lucky.
yeah, thanks for your time. And I'm glad I taped it, so we'll share it with some of our other people and Common Cause people to start thinking about these issues. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks all.
Bye. Hey.